was the responsible daughter, the one who worked through college, paid the bills, and got nothing in return. Then my grandfather died. And they gave everything to my sister. I asked, "Did you change his will?" And their silence told me everything. That day I stopped being the family ATM. My revenge? Not screaming, not fighting, just one sentence. Think of this as my gift to myself. Want to know what happened next? Trust me, you'll want to hear this. I am 32-year-old Celine, and I never imagined that I would be the kind to distance myself from my own family. I spent my entire childhood working for the meager attention of my parents, while they lavished everything on my sister Lyra. They persuaded my grandfather to leave me nothing when he passed away. They and my pampered sister received every penny. I had been their financial bulwark for years, contributing more than $42,000 that I will never see again. Everything changed when Mom texted me last month saying, "Mortgage is due." It took me years to get the guts to speak what I should have said. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments section before I reveal what occurred next. To learn how I overcame financial abuse, press the like button and subscribe if you've ever had to confront family members who have taken advantage of you. One thing came with being the Wilson family's eldest daughter: responsibility. I was expected to lead by example, achieve academic excellence, and assist with my younger sister Lyra starting at the age of 11. Lyra, however, existed in a whole different reality. I recall turning 16. I got a useful gift, a calculator for my AP calculus class, and a talk about college savings while my peers got automobiles and sweet 16 parties. 3 years later, Lyra celebrated her 16th birthday with a designer wardrobe, a weekend at a fancy hotel, and the identical car I had saved for 3 summers. My mother Eloise used to tell family members, "Celine is so responsible." I was raised with the belief that she doesn't need the extras Lyra does. When I regularly made the honor roll, my accomplishments were taken for granted. My parents hosted a celebration meal for Lyra after she achieved a B- average. Franklin, my father, was less overt about the partiality, but he allowed it to continue by being silent. He was a civil engineer, a quiet man who sometimes gave me $20 when I accomplished something important, a covert recognition that never resulted in real equality in our household. It was at college that the difference became unavoidable. To pay for the remaining costs, I worked 30 hours a week in a university bookshop in spite of my scholarships. 3 years later, Lyra went to the same university, but her experience was very different. In addition to housing her in the upscale dorms and paying her tuition in full, my parents also provided her with a monthly allowance that was higher than what I made working. My mother gave me a scathing response when I questioned her about this discrepancy. "Celine, you've always been wonderful with money. For Lyra to succeed, she needs additional assistance." I relocated to Chicago after college and found an entry-level job with the reputable accounting firm Nelson & Burke. Those were challenging early years. A bed and desk could hardly fit in my small studio flat, but I had earned it on my own. I steadily moved up the corporate ladder, accumulating the financial security my parents never instilled in me. I met Elias at a friend's holiday party around this time. He was a software developer who saw right through my carefully crafted independence to the hurt underneath. He had a good heart and a realistic perspective on life. On our third date, after I had downplayed yet another story about the dynamics of my family, he said, "You're allowed to be angry about how they treated you." Even though I had distanced myself from my birthplace, I continued to make weekly phone calls to my parents. I sent Christmas and birthday presents. I went there for a big vacation. I hoped for recognition each time, but it never materialized. Every time, I walked away feeling both disappointed and resolved to finally quit chasing their acceptance. 4 years, the trend persisted. When Lyra left graduate school to discover herself, my parents unquestionably provided for her financially. They complimented her free spirit when she changed jobs frequently, leaving when obligations got too taxing. In the meantime, I barely received passing recognition for my accomplishments and promotions. I did, however, stay in touch. I reassured myself that family was family, and that someday everything would be balanced. When my grandfather August died last year, that illusion was dashed. Compared to my parents, Grandpa Theo had been different. He saw me at family get-togethers. He would sincerely listen to my responses when he inquired about my professional background. On his mantle, He had a picture of me during my college graduation. "Reminds me of you," he would write as he slipped me books on successful women in business when I visited. He was the only person of the family that gave me a sense of worth. I took time off work to assist with his care when he became ill. While my parents and Lyra occasionally visited, I took care of his prescriptions, took him to appointments, and read to him in the evenings. He would occasionally touch my hand during those peaceful hours and remark, "Celine, you're a good egg. Don't listen to anyone who tells you otherwise." So the pain was real when I got the call of his death. I took a plane home right away, hoping to grieve with my family. Instead, I would soon learn the extent of the family's favoritism, and how it would finally drive me to make the most difficult choice of my life. I was sitting by myself in my childhood bedroom the night before the funeral, looking at old pictures of Grandpa Theo and me. In one, he taught me how to fish while I was on his lap at the age of 7. In another, he proudly stood next to me as I graduated from high school. "I already miss you," I whispered as I caressed his cheek with my finger. I had no idea that the following day would come to light things that would alter my entire perception of my family, and the grandfather I had held in such high regard. Grandfather August's funeral, which took place at the same church where he had been a member for more than 50 years, was a solemn event. I took condolences from my grandfather's friends and distant relatives while sitting in the first row next to my parents and Lyra. Numerous people came up to me directly and said that August had praised me, that he was proud of what I had achieved. Every remark made me more determined to remember him. 3 days later, we assembled for the will reading at my grandfather's lawyer, Franklin Bradley's office. Photographs of Franklin's sailing exploits adorned the walls of the dark wood and leather office. Throughout the years, my grandfather had made reference to the fact that he had provided for me in his will. Even though I wasn't hoping for a fortune, his remarks had given me consolation and served as a final affirmation of our unique relationship. "I want to offer my condolences before we start," Franklin remarked, adjusting his reading spectacles. August was a buddy as well as a client. I could see my mother and Lyra looking at each other as Franklin started reciting the typical legal preamble. Their faces tightened my gut for some reason. "I leave my house and everything in it, worth about $320,000, to my daughter Eloise and her husband Franklin." Not surprised, my parents nodded. "I leave my investment portfolio, which is currently worth $175,000, and my rare coin collection, which is valued at $42,000, to my granddaughter Lyra." Lyra reached for my mother's hand with a smile. "To my granddaughter Celine," Franklin added, gazing up at me through his glasses. "I leave my library, especially the books we read together, and my fishing gear, which made our excursions enjoyable." Franklin had already moved on to lesser bequests to distant cousins, but I longed for more. It felt like the room swayed around me. Fishing gear and books. Nothing more. "Is that all?" When Franklin was done, I asked, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. Franklin appeared uneasy. "Yes, your grandfather left you that entire amount," I remarked. "But that can't be right." He informed me that he had provided for me in his will. My mom cleared her throat. "This isn't the place or time, Celine." Franklin rearranged a few documents. "It is important to note that this will was revised around 8 months ago. August was sane when he made these modifications, but the prior version was distributed differently. It was 8 months ago, when I was employed in Chicago and worked 60-hour weeks. My granddad was available to my parents every day. It was a haze on the way home from the lawyer's office. I said I had to make work calls, so I turned down the family meal. Rather, I traveled to Lakeside Park, where I learned how to fish from Grandpa Theo. I finally started crying as I sat on our favorite seat, not because of the money per se, but because of what it stood for. In the end, even my grandfather had favored Lyra over me. My phone rang. My best friend from college, Stephanie, was there. "What was the outcome?" she inquired. My voice broke as I said they got everything. Lyra, Mom, and Dad. I took his fishing gear and books. A pause. "Oh, Celine. 8 months ago, he made a will change. Somehow they must have reached him. Are you certain? The grandfather you told me doesn't sound like that." I said, "I don't know what to believe anymore. However, I will find out." I was determined to find answers, so I traveled to my parents' house that evening. They were already talking about how to invest the bequest when I found them in the living room with Lyra. I said from the doorway, "I need to talk to you." With a look of annoyance on her face, my mother looked up. We assumed you had returned to Chicago. Not just yet. I'd like to know what became of Grandpa's will. My dad shifted in his chair uneasily. Celine, these things are complicated. His will was somewhat different 8 months ago. What was different? Lyra gave an eye roll. Why is it important? It's finished. It is important to me, I emphasized. He claimed to have taken care of me. My mom got to her feet. Your grandfather recognized that Lyra was more in need of the money than you were. You have stability and a career. Lyra is still figuring out who she is. Finding her way? Her age is 29. At what point does she start taking responsibility for herself? My father interrupted, saying that's unfair. Your sister faces distinct difficulties. Like what? Being pampered all her life? Having it all given to her? Lyra's cheeks turned red. I don't have to adopt your dull lifestyle choices just because you chose to be a corporate drone. My mother said, we've been helping Lyra as she considers her options. She will have a foundation thanks to the inheritance. How about me? Grandpa, didn't I deserve anything? The look on my mother's face stiffened. Celine, you've always handled money well. You don't require assistance. Rehearsed since I was a child, those words struck me like a blow to the body. I had once again been used as a weapon because of my financial responsibilities, which had been developed out of need rather than choice. Have you discussed altering Grandpa's will with him? I asked straight. All I needed was the brief look back and forth between my parents. My father acknowledged we talked to him about family needs. As parents, we must think about what's best for both of our kids. Both? Have you ever thought about what's best for me? That's unfair, my mom yelled. We have always supported you. I gave a sour laugh. When have you been there for me? When did you cover Lyra's expenses as I worked my way through college? When did I start my career on my own? Or perhaps when I repeatedly assisted you with your financial crises? There was silence in the room. What kinds of financial crises? Lyra inquired, appearing truly perplexed. I looked over at her. You were unaware? For years our parents have come to me for financial support. I've got to be good with money because of this. To provide for all of you, not just me. As I left, firmly closing the door behind me, the realization lingered in the air. I finally faced the reality I had been avoiding for years as I clutched the steering wheel in the rental car until my knuckles became white. I had allowed my relatives to take advantage of me. 3 years after I went to Chicago, my parents first sought for financial assistance. I had finally begun to accumulate a small savings account after being promoted to staff accountant at Nelson & Burke. On a Tuesday night, I was in my apartment making supper when I received the call. It's Mom, Celine. We are in a predicament. She spoke in the tone I had learned to associate with terrible news, a blend of martyrdom and urgency. They were 3 months past due on their mortgage. Foreclosure was being threatened by the bank. In order to stay current and keep their house, they required $12,500. Mom stated that they had fallen behind because my father had been between projects. That evening I transferred the funds, drawing from the reserves I had set aside for a down payment on my own home. My mother sounded insulted when I inquired about a repayment schedule. Celine, we are family. Formal agreements between us are not necessary. We will reimburse you once things have stabilized. Nothing ever settled down. They required $4,200 for property taxes 6 months later. Then a new furnace costs $1,800. I transferred the funds without question each time. The pledge to repay dwindled a bit more quickly each time. Soon after, Lyra's financial requirements were added to the list of requests. The repairs for her car came to $3,200. She paid a $2,000 security deposit for her apartment. After visiting the emergency room without insurance, a $4,500 medical bill was sent to her. Every time, instead of handling the matter themselves, my parents phoned me. They might add, Lyra is having difficulties at the moment. You are aware of the difficulties facing today's youth. They never seemed to see the irony that I was only 3 years Lyra's senior. My personal life, meanwhile, was on wait. Stephanie and I had planned a months-long trip to Puerto Rico, but we had to postpone it so I could pay my parents' property taxes. In order for me to contribute to Lyra's medical bills, the engagement ring Elias and I had selected was lowered to a lesser model. Elias became more worried. He stated, "They're taking advantage of you." One evening after I had spoken with my mother for an hour about Lyra's most recent financial difficulties. "Their family," I said without thinking. How should I proceed? Allow them to suffer. They are grown-ups who frequently make poor financial decisions. Additionally, they have little motivation to improve because they know you will save them. I vehemently defended them, even though I knew that what he was saying was true. With every request, every unfulfilled pledge to pay back, and every careless rejection of my own financial objectives, that portion became larger. Following a particularly contentious dispute over boundaries, I made a spreadsheet that listed all of the loans I had given my family. Even I was taken aback by the total, $78,600 over 5 years. Not a single cent was paid back. I kept taking their calls in spite of this realization, kept sending money when requested, remained optimistic that they will eventually acknowledge my sacrifices and return the favor by supporting me. My career developed gradually. I became a supervisor after becoming a senior accountant. I made more money, but I didn't save any more. My friends were investing for retirement, purchasing homes, and traveling abroad. I was postponing my personal goals while supporting my family's way of life. They were always made at the most inconvenient moments. I remember my mother calling me about an unpaid energy bill while I was getting ready for a big presentation. Lyra would text me about rent money when Elias and I were celebrating our anniversary. My priorities were always subordinated to their emergencies. Although subtle, the manipulation was successful. My mother would let out a loud sigh if I was hesitant to offer assistance. I suppose we'll just need to come up with a solution. I hope that your father's blood pressure problems wouldn't be a hardship. Or, I'll have to inform Lyra that we are unable to assist, even though she was counting on us to do so. She has become really brittle lately. There was always the suggestion that I would suffer if I refused, because in the family story I would be the bad guy. I therefore kept giving, continued to condone their reckless financial behavior. Elias watched in increasing alarm. He declared, "This isn't sustainable. You're giving up your future for people who wouldn't give it to you in return." Though my conviction was waning, I responded, "You don't understand family obligation." He retorted, "I understand healthy relationships. This isn't one either." My family's dynamics caused tension in our connection. Elias desired a future with me that included financial stability, marriage, and perhaps even children. As my family depleted my money, the future became farther and farther off. Nevertheless, I continued to project the picture of the accomplished daughter. I brought presents, went over for the holidays, and listened to my parents boast about Lyra's most recent ventures while downplaying my own accomplishments. Because I was covering Lyra's expenses, I grinned at dinners when she talked about vacations I could never afford. It was exhausting to experience the cognitive dissonance. I was the family ATM and the family success story all at once. The self-centered one who occasionally questioned the arrangement, and the responsible one who was always unable to do enough. During this time I kept thorough documentation. Each transfer, every promise that is broken, each guilt trip. I needed proof that I wasn't just dreaming about the imbalance, not because I expected reimbursement. That my mounting bitterness was grounded in actuality. Elias recommended therapy as I got closer to my 30th birthday. He explained, "You deserve support navigating this situation, not because there's something wrong with you." First, I resisted. Going to therapy was like confessing that I was unable to manage my family by myself. However, after another year went by with nothing changing, I eventually scheduled a consultation with family relationship specialist Dr. Camille Rhodes. As I narrated my family tale in her cozy office, I was surrounded by peaceful artwork and plants. Every session revealed patterns I had missed because I had been too close. One sign of a more serious dysfunction was the financial exploitation. Dr. Winters remarked after our third session, "What you're describing sounds like financial abuse. Your family has established a situation in which their resources are private, and yours are viewed as shared property. Reciprocity does not exist there. Exploitation is what that is." The word abuse sounded harsh, but it was true. It produced a foundation for comprehending manipulation that lasted for years. Years of giving in one direction. One more revelation would tip the scales as I got closer to the breaking point and make me make the choice I had been putting off for years. A choice that would start me on the road to taking back my life and drastically change the way I interacted with my family. Unexpectedly, during a regular Sunday phone conversation with my mother, the breaking point occurred. I had left Elias and I at brunch to answer the phone, anticipating the customary updates on local rumors and Lyra's most recent activities. "Did you check out Lyra's Instagram?" With pride in her voice, my mother inquired. "The Bali resort appears to be stunning. I hadn't noticed it." I had been putting in 70-hour work weeks to finish a significant audit for a customer. Bali? I assumed Lyra was looking for work. Oh, when she returns, she will resume the quest. After her previous job didn't work out, your father and I felt she deserved a break. Lyra had been working as a marketing assistant for precisely 6 weeks when she decided it wasn't aligned with her creative vision. How does she manage to pay for Bali? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. Well, obviously, with a portion of her inheritance from your grandfather. We believed it to be a wise investment in her welfare. Shortly after, I hung up and went back to the table where Elias was waiting calmly. After glancing at my face, he realized what had transpired. I stated bluntly, they sent Lyra to Bali using Grandpa's money. They also requested $1,200 from me last month for her job search costs. Elias grabbed my hand. I apologize. I discovered a video later that day while looking through Lyra's social media accounts, which validated what I had been ignoring for years. It showed Lyra sipping a cocktail while lounging by an infinity pool and conversing with an off-camera person. She laughed and said, "No, money isn't a concern of mine. I'm covered by Mom, Dad, and Celine, the family ATM." For days later, the phrase family ATM kept repeating in my mind. It was true but unrefined. I had turned into just that. I scheduled 2 important appointments the following week. One with Dr. Winters, my therapist, and another with Jonah Vance, a financial advisor who was suggested by a coworker. I informed Dr. Winters that I needed to make some adjustments. However, I fear losing my family entirely. She gave a sympathetic nod. When establishing boundaries with family, that is a common fear. However, think about this. Are you truly losing relationships? Or are you only losing the appearance of exploitation-based relationships? I confessed. It feels like leaving them. Celine, parents shouldn't force their kids handle the family finances. Instead, they should help them become independent. You're not leaving kids behind if you expect them to behave like adults. We use precise language for setting boundaries, anticipating emotional manipulation, and handling the guilt that was always threatening to weaken my resolve throughout the course of multiple sessions. Jonah Vance assisted me in determining the financial harm and formulating a plan of action in the interim. You should have at least twice as much saved as you do now, given your income and the amount you've been providing for your family, he said, looking at his monitor. The good news is that, after you stop the financial drain, you're still young enough to catch up. We developed a recovery plan together, which called for stopping all financial assistance right away. Reallocate money to replenish my emergency reserve. Increase retirement contributions. Start saving for a down payment on a house. You must defend yourself, Jonah said. Think considering creating accounts that your family is unaware of. To be completely honest, you might even want to freeze your credit so that no one can open accounts under your name. I was astonished by the suggestion. I objected. My family wouldn't do that. Jonah had a gentle yet firm look on his face. In my experience, people occasionally resort to desperate measures when they are accustomed to using someone else's resources, and that access is abruptly cut off. I spent 2 weeks writing and revising the email. Elias gave his opinion. Dr. Winters gave advice. The final draft was straightforward and firm without being mean. Subject: a shift in assistance. Dear Lyra, Dad, and Mom, I must let you know that I will no longer be able to help any of you financially after giving my financial condition considerable thought. My personal financial stability has been harmed by the help I've given over the years, so I now have to put my future first. There is no way to change this decision. Please don't ask me for money directly or indirectly. Instead, respect my boundaries. This modification takes effect right now. I cherish our familial bond and hope that we can continue to treat one another with dignity. Celine. Before I clicked, my finger lingered over the send button for over an hour. I immediately blocked all 3 of their numbers after that. I allowed myself to be protected from the inevitable criticism for 48 hours. I celebrated what felt like a beginning and an end by going to supper with Elias that evening. He raised his glass and said, "I'm proud of you. This is difficult, but it is essential," I said. I keep waiting for the guilt to hit. But I just feel relief right now. Naturally, the guilt would accompany the hurt, rage, and uncertainty. However, I felt lighter than I had in a long time as I sat across from the man who had supported me over years of secret struggles. I had started the process of taking back my life. I had no idea how hard my family would battle to maintain the status quo, or how strong I would have to be to stand my ground. As I had anticipated, the first reaction was quiet. As I had done so many times before, I pictured my mother reading the email with her lips pushed into a thin line, waiting for me to pull back the border. After 2 days, there were no missed calls or texts when I unblocked their numbers. Nothing but quiet. During supper, I informed Elias. They think I'll cave. He nodded and said, they're waiting you out. That has been the trend. You establish a limit. They disregard it. Eventually, you give in. Not this time, I responded, sounding more assured than I actually was. It was exactly 1 week of stillness. The campaign then started. My mother first sent me a friendly text message that said, just checking in, sweetheart. It has been a long time since I heard from you. The email was not mentioned, as though it had never been there. The tone shifted when I gave kind, cursory responses without providing any financial assistance. I was discussing that loan you provided us last year with your father. We want to begin repaying it shortly. A carrot that is dangling without a time or quantity limit. Voicemails followed, getting more and more emotional. It's Mom, Celine. I'm concerned for you. Cutting off contact with family is not like you. Give me a call back, please. I hadn't stopped talking. Only monetary assistance. However, they were the same thing in their minds. My father made an effort to be more straightforward. On a Sunday afternoon, he called in a rough, uneasy voice. Regarding this email, Celine, your mom is really upset. Dad, I know this is a change, but my choice is still in place. Celine, we're not requesting handouts. Just family supporting family. Over the past 5 years, Dad, I've given you and Lyra more than $40,000. It wasn't paid back. Family helping family is not what that is. 3 adults are being supported by 1 family member. A deep sigh. You've always had such a binary perspective on things. There was no settlement at the end of the call. I had the hazy hope that I would wake up. Lyra went another way. After 3 weeks, knowing Elias had his weekly gaming session, she called late one evening. She started off with the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. D, I need to talk to you. How are you, Becca? I mimicked her tone. I'm in a little predicament. I have certain expenses that are due and my credit cards are at their maximum limit. I hoped you could assist me. Only this once. Lyra, I can't do that. In my email, I was explicit. She objected, saying that was about Mom and Dad, not me. Additionally, this is unique. There is an emergency. Exactly what is the emergency? She paused. Well, in addition to having to pay my rent, I also enrolled in a digital marketing course. I'm investing in my future with it. There is no emergency there. It's not well planned. I apologize, but I have to say no. Her tone became stern. All right. However, you should be aware that I will have to return home if I am unable to pay the rent. Additionally, Mom and Dad are now unable to afford another person. There was a clear warning, if you don't help me, I'll become their problem, which will then become your problem once more. I answered coolly, that's a decision you'll have to make. I can't continue to condone financial irresponsibility, even though I love you. Without saying another word, she hung up. Lyra shared a vague but direct comment about money-focused family members on social media the following day. Many family members left comments inquiring as to what had transpired. Lyra responded with a meticulously crafted account of our predicament, portraying me as the cold-blooded corporate drone who had forgotten her origins and herself as the abandoned sister. I didn't answer. I sent the post to Dr. Winters instead. This is a typical strategy, she stated. When direct persuasion is unsuccessful, public humiliation frequently ensues. Continue as is. Participating merely confirms the strategy. The issue drastically worsened for weeks after that email. One morning at 7 a.m., my mother texted me to let me know that my mortgage was due. We are $2,100 short. Is it possible for you to transfer today? We will reimburse you next month. No recognition of my limits. No justification. It was only assumed that I would be in line. I inhaled deeply before sending the response I had rehearsed with Dr. Winters. I'm sorry to hear you're struggling, replied I, but as I stated in my email, I am no longer in a position to provide financial assistance. The reaction was instantaneous. Celine, this isn't like you. We are related. You are necessary to us. After switching off my phone, I went to work and concentrated on my important client presentation that morning. Both of my parents had left me 17 voicemails and SMS, each more urgent than the previous, when I checked my messages over lunch. "We might lose the house, Celine, please. Your dad isn't feeling well. He's not doing well under the stress. I never imagined that my own daughter would abandon us." The last message was different. My father gave it to me. "This Sunday we must have a family meeting. 2 p.m. Our home. No compromise." Before I agreed to go, I spoke with Dr. Winters and Elias. Elias said this has all the hallmarks of an ambush. "They're going to gang up on you." I assured him I can handle it. I have to do this face to face. For good and all. With a knot in my gut, Sunday arrived. My cousin Michael's motorcycle, Uncle George's SUV, and my Aunt Lenore's sedan were among the other vehicles in the driveway when I arrived at my parents' house. The living room had been set up as an intervention within. A circle of chairs. There are solemn faces around. On the sofa, my parents sat together. Beside them was Lyra, who appeared to have been crying because of her red eyes. "Celine," my mother said formally, "we're worried about your recent behavior, so we've asked the family to join us." Aunt Lenore gave a nod. "My dear, we are concerned about you." I stood there and realized all of a sudden what this was. Calmly I stated, "This isn't about concern for me. This is an effort to coerce me into keeping up my financial support of 3 healthy adults." My dad cleared his throat. "Celine, that is unjust. We have been there for you all your life." "Have you?" I said. "Because as it stands, I have been providing for all of you for years while delaying my own life." Uncle George bent over. "Eloise informs me that you have declined to assist them with their mortgage. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I replied plainly. "I've set a boundary after years of giving financial support with no repayment." "However, they might lose their house," Aunt Lenore said. "Just a few months ago, Grandpa left them a sizable inheritance," I noted. "Whatever became of that money?" The room lapsed into an awkward quiet. My mom looked at Lyra, who was now fascinated by the carpet. My dad added hazily, "We had expenses." I said, "Like Lyra's trip to Bali? Or maybe the recently renovated kitchen I saw when I entered today?" More quiet. "I'll tell you what happened," I went on, at last finding the courage to tell the truth. "You used it up. As if you spend all of your money. Without making any future plans. You now anticipate that I will save you again. That's unfair," Lyra muttered in complaint. I turned to her and replied, "Isn't it? In your Bali video, Lyra, you referred to me as the family ATM. Was that reasonable?" My mom let out a gasp. She would never say something like that. "I have the video," I muttered. "If you want, I can play it right now." I made the offer, but nobody accepted. "Celine," my father continued, adopting the commanding tone he had used when I was a youngster, "this has gone far enough. We are your parents. We need your assistance." The message was obvious, but he trailed off. "Either you support your family or what, Dad? Or am I no longer a member of this family?" I inquired. "That's what happened when you persuaded Grandpa to remove me from his will, isn't it? When did you conclude that I didn't deserve his money but Lyra did?" Another awkward quiet. At last, my mother remarked that was different. "We had to make sure Lyra's future was secure." "What about my prospects?" "Who got that?" She answered, "You've always been able to take care of yourself." The basic reality of our family dynamic was revealed. All my life, my ability had been turned against me. I was supposed to live on my own because I could. Lyra got everything because she couldn't or wouldn't. I finally realized how pervasive the dysfunction was as I turned to face my gathered family. This would not be settled in a single altercation. Perhaps there would never be a solution. "I'm going now," I muttered. "I stand by my decision. I will not be supporting any of you financially in the future. I'll have to accept the consequences if it means I'm no longer accepted in this family." My mother's voice broke as she yelled after me as I made my way to the door. "Please, Celine. Tomorrow is the mortgage due date. There is nowhere else for us to go." At the threshold, I stopped. I felt pressured by a lifetime of indoctrination to go back and solve their issues and take responsibility once more. However, something had changed within me. The shame was still there, but it was accompanied by a fresh understanding. "You already cut me out of your inheritance," I remarked evenly as I slowly turned and spoke the words that would make all the difference. "Think of this as my gift to myself." My shoes were the only sound to break the startled calm that ensued as I made my way to my car. I drove away from the home where I had grown up, away from the family that had taken so much and given so little in return, with firm hands. Within an hour, the mayhem started. There were so many notifications on my phone. The first was my mother's heartfelt voicemail, which wavered between pleading and accusing. How could you say something so cruel? Following all that we have done for you. We need you, Celine, please. Everything will be lost for us. My father then sent me shorter, more irate texts saying, your behavior today was inexcusable. We'll chat when you're prepared to apologize. The most vicious strategy was used by Lyra, who sent a string of progressively angry messages. Now you've actually done it. Mom is still in tears. His blood pressure is so high, according to Dad, that he may need to visit the emergency room. You are responsible if they lose the house. I hope that's something you can live with. The whole family is aware of what you did. Nobody is with you. I paused at that last line. Was that accurate? Was I viewed as the bad guy by the whole extended family? I ignored the thought. Their impression was predicated on a meticulously constructed story, one that portrayed me as the ungrateful daughter who deserted her parents rather than the exploited provider who at last established boundaries. The flying monkeys showed up next as expected. Mails and calls from relatives who live far away. Some people are worried. Others are accusing. Celine, your mom is heartbroken. There must be a compromise. Family supports family. We were brought up in this manner. I never imagined you would be so cold-hearted. But every message made me more determined. I had been prepared for this very situation by Dr. Winters. I did what I had planned. I blocked every family member for a while. To isolate family messages into a folder I could review when I was ready, I set up email filters. Social media privacy settings were tightened, and accounts with the most dramatic drama were deactivated. I then turned on my support network. Elias arrived with a steady demeanor and takeaway. Encouraged, Stephanie called. I was asked to supper by coworkers, which brought some regularity to the midst of the craziness. A week later, Aunt Lenore called me out of the blue. With hesitation, I replied, "It's your aunt, Celine. Don't hang up, please." With caution, I said, "I'm listening." To my surprise, she said, "I owe you an apology. When I attended that family meeting, I was unaware of the circumstances. I have been discussing your mother's expectations of you for years, but I was unaware of how far it had progressed." "You have. Indeed. Things got out of hand after you departed." In her distress, your mother revealed several things that gave us a completely different picture from what she had previously told us. I want you to be aware of. I agree with your choice to establish limits. Her remarks were like a lifeline thrown into rough seas. I wasn't alone myself. Not every member of the family thought I was the bad guy. Another surprise came a few days later in the form of a text message from my cousin Michael. "Hello, Celine. I wanted to let you know that I understand. When I received my bonus a few years ago, they treated me in the same way. Never reimbursed me either. Remain resilient. When I needed it most, these unanticipated pals gave me validation. Their assistance confirmed what Dr. Winters had been telling me all along. I wasn't the only one who experienced financial abuse in the family. My limits weren't out of line, and my perspective of the situation wasn't skewed. I used journaling, counseling, and lengthy talks with Elias to work through the complicated feelings as the weeks went by. The most unexpected aspect was perhaps the grief, a profound lamentation for the family I had hoped for instead of the one I had. During a particularly tearful session, I told Dr. Winters it's like they died. But they're still alive, they're still trying to make me feel bad and sending me deceptive messages. She said, "You're mourning the loss of illusion. The delusion that they would eventually change and value your sacrifices in the future, that in time, they would give you the same regard that they give Lyra. That is a significant loss that merits mourning." Eventually, without my assistance, my parents managed to pay their mortgage. Aunt Lenore informed me that they had obtained a high-interest personal loan as a temporary solution to the situation, but it did not address the underlying disorder. Lyra temporarily returned home, a move I had a feeling would become permanent. Her independent lifestyle was no longer viable without my financial assistance, especially since her inheritance had been exhausted. Knowing that they still didn't get it was the most difficult part. I continued to be the antagonist in their story, the daughter who deserted her family when they were in need. They were unable or unwilling to recognize the years of unequal donations, the exploitation of my accomplishments, and the basic injustice of expecting one child to provide for 3 people. However, every week that goes by with limits upheld. With every financial choice that put my future ahead of theirs. With every conversation, I was surrounded by supportive friends and relatives. I became more determined. A developing sense of calm, righteousness, and long overdue self-respect took the place of the guilt. My father wrote me a letter 6 months after that fatal family gathering. In contrast to his earlier sentimental or irate texts, this one was thoughtful, almost modest. Celine, I've been thinking a lot lately. Even though I disagree with your approach to this matter, I'm starting to see why you felt compelled to take such extreme action. I'm working with your mom to make adjustments. At our age it is difficult, but we are making an effort. I'm hoping we can mend our shattered relationship one day. It wasn't truly an apology. However, it was a recognition. A tiny step in the direction of a potential reconciliation on more wholesome grounds. Lyra, meanwhile, remained silent. Hers would probably be the familial relationship that healed the slowest, if at all. Being the favored child, the one who merited assistance and preferential treatment, had been the foundation of her identity. Her identity was fundamentally challenged by my refusal to engage in that dynamic. However, I was living without the continual burden of family financial difficulties for the first time in my adult life. Without feeling bad about not doing enough. Without the bitterness that comes from unfair treatment. Instead of attempting to undo the effects of their bad decisions, I was constructing a future according to my priorities. During times of uncertainty, I kept thinking about the one sentence that had made all the difference. You already excluded me from your legacy. Think of this as my own bequest. Money wasn't the only factor. It has to do with value. About worth. Regarding my basic right to put my own health first. Regaining the life that had been put on wait for too long was the goal. And I was positive that I had made the right decision in spite of the hurt, the unresolved relationships, and the continuous family drama. I was standing in my new condo's kitchen, 6 months after I had set financial boundaries with my family, letting the early light stream through my own windows in my own home, bought with my own money. With his coffee mug in hand, Elias leaned against the counter and grinned as he observed me. He inquired, "What are you thinking about?" I answered, "How different everything is. I couldn't have predicted this a year ago. The adjustments had been both significant and useful. My financial circumstances have significantly improved as I was no longer burdened with providing for my family. 3 months prior, I had finally met the savings targets Jonah and I had set, thanks to a promotion to senior manager at Nelson & Burke. The concrete representation of my financial independence was this condo, a contemporary 2-bedroom in a location I had previously thought was unaffordable. Every piece of furniture and every ornamental decision had been selected with purpose rather than haste or concession. The family crisis had only strengthened my bond with Elias. He had been my pillar of support, recognizing my choices even when they were challenging and providing assistance without passing judgment. The faith I now felt in our future together was symbolized by the little velvet box that was concealed in my desk drawer, waiting for the ideal opportunity to pop the question. My family's circumstances had changed in unforeseen ways. I proposed seeing my parents at a neutral venue, a coffee shop in the heart of the city, after 4 months of little communication. Elias sat at a close table, providing us with privacy while yet being accessible, but he came for moral support. The initial meeting was silent and uncomfortable. With new lines etched into her face and the obvious effects of financial readjustment, my mother appeared older. My father appeared shrunken, a tentative uncertainty taking the place of his formerly powerful presence. After carefully examining me, my mother remarked, "You look good." "I'm doing fine," I answered. "How's it going for you?" Eventually, the deliberate dance of small talk gave way to deeper discussion. They had got to alter for the better. The house had been sold since it was too costly without my assistance. They had moved to a small townhouse in a less affluent area. My father acknowledged that it's an adjustment. However, the mortgage is now manageable. For the first time in more than 2 decades, my mother had accepted a part-time position as an administrative assistant. With a hint of pride, she remarked, "The hours are reasonable. And the additional money is helpful." I outlined certain conditions for any future partnership. Public meetings. Phone calls were scheduled and financial conversations were limited to topics pertaining to their progress towards self-sufficiency. There would be no contact if such boundaries were crossed. Maybe they couldn't think of anything else, so they agreed. Maybe because they were starting to realize the consequences of their actions. In any case, we now had a structure that was founded on respect for one another rather than exploitation. The path taken by Lyra had been more convoluted. She cycled through anger, guilt, and finally, grudging acceptance after returning home. She had to find her own place to live and a steady job for the first time when my parents downsized. She stepped up to the challenge, which surprised me. She got a job as an assistant at a small marketing company through a friend of a friend. Although the work was hard and the pay was low, she had been there for 4 months, which was longer than any other job she had ever held. Our relationship was still tense, but a straightforward text message that read, "I got my first raise today," marked the beginning of a tentative reunion. Accomplished it without assistance. It was a glimpse of the self-reliant adult she might still become, a little message that acknowledged her own skill and the pride of earned accomplishment. The improvement in my ties with my extended family was the most surprising result. Aunt Lenore started to show up frequently in my life. Our Sunday phone conversations provided sincere support and connection. Now once a month, Cousin Michael and I get together for supper to share stories, laugh, and support. Once overshadowed by the severity of the dysfunction in my biological family, these relationships now had space to flourish in the more emotionally healthy setting I had established. I had also found peace with my grandfather's heritage. Once heartbreaking reminders of what I had not received, the books he left me suddenly took center stage in my home office. In my guest room, his meticulously refurbished fishing gear was displayed on the wall. Originally perceived as consolation awards, they were now cherished heirlooms. They brought to remember the one relative who had always valued me, rather than my shortcomings. Elias brought me back to the present when he proposed that we have Stephanie and David around for supper this weekend. Celebrate the new location appropriately. I agreed, mentally organizing the food, relishing the pleasure of hosting friends in a place that felt like mine. "That sounds perfect," I said. I felt a sense of possibility later that night as Elias and I talked about our future, something that had been lacking over the many years of being financially involved with my family. I said, "I've been considering opening my own practice. A small accounting firm that combines my professional skills with what I've learned personally, something that helps women achieve financial independence." Without hesitation, Elias remarked, "You'd be fantastic at that. And given your clientele and reputation, the timing might be ideal." "It's risky," I admitted. He squeezed my hand and answered, "Usually the best things are. And you are the one who understands how to properly manage risk." As we talked about possible business plans and schedules, I became acutely aware of how drastically my viewpoint had changed. Such an endeavor would have been unimaginable a year ago, emotionally as well as financially. My dreams had been stifled by the obligations of my family. No drive to create a future consistent with my principles. Even though it had been difficult to enforce, the limitations I had set had produced something priceless: space, room to expand, room for potential, room for a life characterized by decision-making instead of duty. I had given myself the gift of financial and emotional independence, and it had paid off in ways I could never have predicted. I was overcome with appreciation as I looked around at the house I had built, at my supporting spouse, and at the opportunities that lay ahead. For what I had managed to recover, not for what had been taken away from me. I inherited this, earned through bravery and self-control. By refusing to be exploited and accepting one's own dignity, I was going to leave this legacy. Not from inheritance but from principles upheld in the face of adversity. This was my life at last, really my own. If you were me, how would you respond? Have you ever had to establish tough limits with relatives who exploited you financially? Share your experience by leaving a comment below. And that's how I finally chose myself. The best revenge? It wasn't anger or payback, it was peace. It was building a life where I no longer needed their approval, where my success spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. If you're facing betrayal or feeling stuck in old wounds, know this: setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's healing. You're allowed to grow, to let go, and to rise. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who kept taking? What did you learn about yourself? Share your story in the comments below.